So this might
Adventures in telecommunications.
Yeah. We build nuclear power plants, so we can't get a clean phone line.
Yes, we'll work on that, though, and get that corrected.
Okay, well, we apologize for that here at NRC, and Dominion, if you want to just go ahead with your presentation that you were discussing on slide 6 for today's call, we'd appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay, resuming the discussion on slide 6, the ESBR's standard design for reinforced concrete section analysis uses the program SSDP-2D, which uses a linear concrete stress-strain relationship and a linear stress-strain relationship for reinforcing steel. For NA3, we applied that same program to the NA3 using NA3 site-specific loads. We apply specifically the seismic load. We applied to the same DCD sections, and we found a couple sections where we exceeded the conservative SSDP-2D limits based on the linear approach. When we wrote the FSAR, it was on the premise that SSDP-2D gave a reasonable approximation to the ASME code limit. And we went and looked at ACI 34901 acceptance criteria, which is truly what's applicable for outside containment, and found that we were still underneath the acceptance criteria for ACI 34901, and so we claimed that the elements were acceptable. Somebody needs to mute.
Could everyone please mute your phone, whoever has the bird? We can hear you.
Thank you.
Who has the bird? All right, continue with your discussion. We apologize.
Mute on.
When we received your question, we did an investigation and determined that what was in SSDP was highly conservative, and in reality, it was not the bounding ASME load. It was basically a very conservative assessment, and we went further to look into going on to slide 8. We basically looked at the ASME code, and it allows both a linear and a parabolic stress-strain curve for concrete. And whereas the ACI 34901 is the rectangular stress block that we all know. If you redo the concrete stress analysis using the parabolic curve, you'll find a lot more capacity in any section compared to the linear curve that was used in, or what is used in SSDP-2D.
That's what used in DCD.
Correct. If you go to page 9, it basically summarizes is what we did. Basically, the first top, I think everybody understands that, who is familiar with reinforced concrete design, is 2004 ASME uses an allowable stress approach to calculate stresses. You got both service loads and load combinations and factored loads and load combinations. And ACI 34891 uses reduction factors, uses all factored loads, and uses reduction factors. What we did on slide 10, we'll get there in a minute, we basically have plotted 4 plots. One is the 2004 ASME factored load, primary plus secondary, with a linear stress block, ASME stress allowables, and this is basically what was done in the DCD via SSDP-2D. We also plotted the 2004 ASME factored loads, primary plus secondary, with a parabolic stress block and ASME stress allowables. Then we plotted the ACI 34901 factored capacity, which is what we used as the acceptance criteria in the FSAR when we exceeded the linear stress block, which would be that top curve. And then we also plotted, just for information, the ACI 34901 nominal capacity, which is basically assuming, I would call this was the capacity under for testing purposes. Basically, this is actually the failure point. No, but basically take away all the margin. If you look at slide 10, the red curve is the SSDP curve that is documented in the DCD. The black curve is the ACI 34901, and I believe there's an REI that explains the small triangular area in the compression zone where ACI is less than ASME. The blue dashed dot curve is the ASME factored parabolic curve, and you can see by that it is always greater than the ACI 349 curve and is greater than the ASME linear stress strain curve plot. So basically, what we're proposing to do is we need to revise the departure statement. Is basically we are sticking with using the apply the standard of using the limiting case of ASME code in ACI 34901. The one caveat to that is that SSDP 2D is not that limit. So there will be a change in methodology. I think if you go to slide 12, it basically explains what we'll do on wherever we have a element that exceeds the SSDP 2D limit. In addition to the ACI 34901 PM curve that we currently show in the reports that we have submitted to you, we will add the ASME factored load curve. So you have both there to compare, and we'll show that we meet both, or at least underneath both.
This MP curve, it's only for moment and axial force. How about other loads, like shear, things like that?
Shear, shear is we're meeting SSDP limits, and we are actually they're very close. ACI 349 and ASME are basically identical for shear capacity. I think there's some difference in punching shear, but in general they're identical. We are looking at we are doing some special ACI 349 checks for seismic shear, where ACI 349 actually governs over ASME. That's specifically for shear walls.
So including in-plane shear.
Those checks are still in place, and we're not changing those. We met all the criteria.
This is Joe Braverman. At a high level, I think what we would like is to have a written justification that goes well beyond these bullets, and it provides the explanation of how you're deviating and how this approach differs from what was done in a DCD. And I have some questions or elements that I hope you capture as part of that, because it's very difficult to follow looking at these slides, but some of the things or observations I have or want to ask you, the SSDP code, which does the member design check, right now it envelopes the ASME and ACI 349 codes, right?
No.
It does
it's
not?
Strictly the ASME. The code that was approved basically only does an ASME stress check, and the assumption in the DCD time frame was it was okay for it can be used for both ACI 349 and ASME stress checks.
Okay,
There's no guarantee that.
Then I'm confused because I thought the deviation in in the FSAR indicates that you're deviating from the DCD because the DCD commits to designing structures outside and attached to the containment, like the reactor building, and you're designing those members to both the ASME code and ACI 349. And now it seems like you're indicating, no, the SSDP does not do that. It only designs it to ASME, so I'm a little confused.
Well, what you may have missed on slide 11 is we're planning to remove the departure or rewrite the departure. We're planning to continue to meet the commitment to meet both ASME code limits and ACI 349 code limits. The change would be we would where SSDP limits with the linear stress strain curve are exceeded, we would look at ACI 349 parabolic, or I should say look at ACI 349 code limits and ASME code limits using a parabolic curve.
Oh, so now things are starting to become a little clearer. I think what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is the SSDP code itself you feel was too conservative based on the way it considers the stress-strain relationships, and so you'd like to deviate on that aspect. However, you still are committing to designing the reactor building / fuel building to both ACI 349 and ASME?
Correct.
Okay. Well, that's a major step. The next question is, why do you think that simply designing for the reactor building / fuel building, why simply, according to your slides, unless I misunderstood, you're committing to designing it really to 349 with the addition of just this PM diagram. However, the ASME code has more than, that aspect of compression and flexure. There's a number of other provisions. Following your guidance a few minutes ago, you're saying, no, you're designing it for the full ASME and 349, not just 349 with this PM criterion. So which is it?
We're going to meet the DCD requirement. We're falling back to rewriting. We're basically removing the departure and going back to the DCD.
Okay, so you are going to design it to the envelope of the ASME and 349. Are you going to modify the SSDP code to do that, or you're writing another code?
Right now, we're going to use the PM curve for the SSDP exceedances. The other aspects we're putting in appendices. We have some other checks that we've done for differences between ASME and ACI, where we put in appendices to the reports that you have.
Oh, so that's helpful. So I think what you're saying now is that you're still using the SSDP, but only in the case of the compression moment interaction diagram. That's the only place that you have exceedances that you need some help with?
Correct.
Oh, okay, that's a lot better. And in those instances, then you're going to develop these new PM curves, which you will still envelope ASME and 349, right?
Correct.
Oh, okay. Then that's some good progress. If you could capture exactly what we discussed as part of your write-up, and I think the staff mentioned to me that they would like to have that, well before the next audit, so we have a chance to look at it and be prepared to discuss it further. Is that doable?
Well, I think
the schedule, but good.
I think it will be helpful if you put it in some form that we can review and look at it before we go out for audit, so that we will not spend time trying to have a path forward or something like that. Okay.
But that will save the time on the part of the staff, unnecessary time, because that will clarify those the affected portions in the FSL and maybe in the technical report. That will be desirable if you correct those affected area before the audit.
This is Gina Borsch. Let me talk with Gary and GEH and John, and we'll get back with you, Mike, okay?
Okay.
Let you know about what we would propose to prepare when we would the schedule for getting it to you, okay?
Okay.
All right, as part of that write-up, if I could continue, here's some elements I still see lacking, and we don't necessarily have to resolve it now, but please think about it and include it. Number one, I didn't see in this presentation discussion about how load factors affect these curves and comparison of them.
That's right.
Should I go on, or do you have a quick response?
Well, I have a quick response. The PM curve is independent of load factors, but when you calculate the, I'll call the P and the M that you plot into that curve to check whether your capacity is within that range, that's where you would take in the load factors. So when you do an ACI 349 check, you would use those applicable load factors, and you'll get yourself a plot on the point, I should say, on the plot. And you could do the same thing using ASME code load factors and get a point on the plot. And as long as the point is within the curves, you're good.
Oh, so these curves do reflect the different load factors, the different stress.
The curves reflect the allowables of the section.
For that specific M and P, and it's like an envelope.
Yeah, and you would calculate load factors would be used to calculate the P and the M using the actual loads.
Okay,
it's independent of the PM.
Okay, how about ASME code works based on allowable stresses, and 349 works on the member strength. So how do you develop the PM curves using the ASME method when what you're getting is allowable stresses, not member strengths? How do
ASME does have a upper limit for both rebar strength and for concrete strength, and that can be used to generate a PM diagram.
All right, so
what you don't get is if you're below the allowable stress, you're not going to get a calculated stress.
Okay. So could you include that in the discussion to explain how? Because everybody knows, ASME code is based on allowable stress. If you could discuss that aspect as well, that you're relying on the limits or given an ASME code, and from that you calculate these strengths. You also mentioned you looked only at primary and secondary stresses. What about if you looked at primary stresses, not primary plus secondary?
The only secondary load is really thermal, and we did look at the primary stresses by itself, and that does pull underneath the ACI 349 curve. But by the same token, your load drops drastically for most of the elements because the thermal loads are so high.
But is it possible to, because this is not the complete picture, is it possible for you to do something like that also for primary? Because the ASME code tells you to check both primary and primary plus secondary.
We do those checks as part of the design process. It's part of the SSDP process. We don't have any exceedances in the primary only. So we never really checked it at this point, but we could go back and check.
No, that's okay. If you're saying you're going to rely on the SSDP for the check on the primary, then there's no need to develop this additional aspect. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. We only had the only exceedances we had or have are in elements away from the containment where it's in the primary plus secondary, and it's mostly thermal that's causing our problems.
Please include that in your narrative as well, because that didn't come across. Okay.
Gary, this is Skip. Mr. Braverman, would a flow chart in the REI response be helpful?
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's a great idea, along with the narrative, not just the flow chart.
Yeah, yes. My civil structural manager had flow chart, but we didn't have time to get it fully vetted for this presentation. So
okay.
He is now upset with me that we didn't have it. So
hit him on the head. Bang him.
Okay. On slide 14, maybe it's an editorial. First bullet. It says ESBWR NA3 FSAR. Which is it? You're referring only to NA3, right? Not the DCD. Right?
No, that doesn't refer to the DCD. It's just saying that the North Anna FSAR for the ESBWR.
Okay. So maybe drop the ESBWR, because that confuses me at least. Okay. You're specifically talking about the North Anna 3. Okay.
Yeah, we understand.
Okay, let's see. I'm just checking if there's any other things. This addresses the analysis and design of the concrete structures outside beyond containment on the nuclear island. But in addition to that, there's the question of jurisdictional boundary of the containment. And in that case, it's not just analysis and design. It includes everything, such as fabrication, inspection, welding, and materials, and so forth. So are you still abiding by, I think what's in the DCD, there's, I think, a figure that talks about the jurisdictional boundary, which includes many more elements, entire code beyond analysis and design. You're still committing to that?
Yes, figure 3.8-1, I believe.
I think that's it.
Yes, we're committing to that still.
All right, so for the peripheral volume, which includes the concrete and reinforcement beyond the outside face, which goes into the reactor building some distance, to develop the full strength of the reinforcement, those regions are part of jurisdictional boundary of ASME, and you will satisfy all aspects of the code still, right?
Correct.
Okay. Could you make that clear also in your write-up? Because, there's some deviations here, and it should be clear.
Well, we didn't deviate from the jurisdiction. I think that's part of the original departure. Had no jurisdictional changes, so.
I agree. That's implied. If you don't want to do that, then in your narrative indicate.
No, we could. No, I'm not saying we can't do it. I'm just pointing out that we didn't take a deviation from there, but we could easily put a statement in the report.
It does imply that. You're right. It does imply that, but I want to make it crystal clear. Another way of doing it is in your narrative indicate that this deviation applies only to the design, analysis and design aspect. Everything, else remains the same, including the jurisdictional boundary.
Okay. No, we could do that.
Okay. I think that's all I have for now.
Okay. Thanks. Let's see, what else is there?
If you wanted to go over your...
Gina, do you have the, couple of list of items that we had some comments on the report?
The comments that Mike sent on Monday, I think, is that what you're asking that, Mayor? We do have that list, yes.
And do you have any question on this?
Well, we haven't talked about it internally yet, but I can certainly ask GEH, the SMEs. Do you all have any questions about it that you would like to ask the NRC staff right now before we end this call?
Gary, I'll answer for you. This is Skip. We have looked at this pretty closely internally, and we don't believe we have any questions at this time.
Okay.
Could I go back just one thing for the addition, the write-up Mr. Braverman was talking about? Is the right place for all that in the revised 37217 response? Is that what the expectation would be?
Yeah, I think so. How about,
okay,
Joe, what do you say?
Yes, but keep in mind, I think the subject really falls in the 3.8 arena, because I think this deviation is somewhat identified in, I think, 3.8.1 and 3G appendix, but it doesn't bother me where you place it, but it does relate to 3.8.
Yeah, and eventually it will be in the FSR, so...
Okay. I presume as part of the response, you're going to also propose markups of how to change 3.8.1 to suit this, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I guess that's it. We are still reviewing stuff. As we find things, we'll let you know.
Gina, this is Mike. I had a question. Did you find anything in those 5 items proprietary? So I can do this as part of my meeting summary, since we got those out late. So those are okay to put in the meeting summary?
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't sure if we were going to need to have a closed call for some of that or not. So, okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
You're welcome.
I think we covered, right?
Do we have any other items? Gina, do you have any other items to discuss while we're all here about the audit too, or what's the date?
Date is 21st.
21st to 25th of March?
Yeah, no, I don't have any questions for this call. I think we're good. I'll talk with you, Mike, separately about maintaining this action item list and perhaps, just closing up some of the, removing some of the items that are closed out and just managing the content a little bit, but we can talk about that later, okay?
Okay, yeah, so we gave you our revised list. You didn't have any questions on it, but it looks like you're going to add 4 new items, if I'm correct?
Right.
All right, I've got it documented. Okay. Well, I appreciate. Okay. Well, I appreciate everyone being with us today. We're going to end the meeting and end the business portion. So, North Hannah and any of your constituents are free to drop off the line now, and we're going to open up the call to any members of the public who would like to ask NRC some questions about today's proceedings. So if you can just announce yourself and then ask your question, we'd be happy to entertain it.
So, Mike, I'm just going to say goodbye and ask all the Dominion team people to drop off. Thank you all very much, and we'll talk with you later, Mike, so I have a call again in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Gina.
You. Bye-bye.
Hello, this is Erica calling from Richmond.
Hi, Erica.
Hey, Michael, what would be very helpful is I got the slides from you today at 11 a.m. I think it'd be really helpful if the public was actually, including myself, obviously, was able to get some of this information a little bit sooner than the same day of the meeting, because that does not give me a chance, because y'all use a lot of acronyms, and it does not give me a chance to really kind of catch up to speed there. So it would be nice if we actually got this information ahead of the meeting, not the same day. That would be very helpful.
Okay, your comments noted. We appreciate it. We do our best that we can to try to get these issues ironed out, and we're kind of in a real-time review mode, so it's something we just kind of have to deal with sometimes to try to make sure that we make these meetings as productive as possible. But we appreciate your comment.
Well, I appreciate that. It just seems like this is kind of a standard way that the NRC deals with a lot of these public meetings. We just don't get most of the information ahead of time. So it would be helpful if y'all could do a little bit better on getting the information out just a little bit sooner. But thank you.
Well, okay, but it's noted. We did get these from Dominion. They were responses to questions that we posed 2 weeks ago. So we will talk to them to try to, see what we can do to try to, get any information out as soon as we can to the public, which is what we're trying to do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Do you have another question? Okay.
No, but thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other members of the public who'd like to ask NRC some questions? Okay. It doesn't sound like it, so we'll close the call, and we appreciate your participation.